I didn't raise you to be selfish, Sarah. I don't know who you've become, but this isn't you." The words cut through the air like a dagger, sharp and final. I stood there, frozen for a moment, my breath caught in my throat, as I faced the man who had once been my son, the son I had given everything for, the son I had spent my entire life making sure was never disappointed, never left behind. And now he stood before me, accusing me of something I had never even considered, of finally living for myself. My name is Sarah, and I've been a mother, a daughter, and a provider for as long as I can remember. I spent my life making sure everyone around me was happy, making sure they had everything they needed. I sacrificed my own dreams, my own desires for the sake of my family's comfort. But what happens when you finally realize that all those sacrifices have left you behind? What happens when you wake up one day and see that the life you've been living is not the one you were meant to have, but the one others demanded of you? I had always been told I was too old-fashioned for this world. It was a label that had been slapped on me more times than I could count, especially by my own family. I wasn't ashamed of it, though. In fact, I'd wear it like a badge of honor, because what I stood for was something the world had seemingly forgotten. I was Sarah, a 48-year-old woman who believed in values that had been passed down to me from generations before, values that my family couldn't comprehend. I believed in working hard for everything I had, saving for the future, and keeping things simple. I didn't trust high-risk investments, flashy stock tips, or living paycheck to paycheck with the hopes that tomorrow would somehow be different. The idea of spending beyond your means was a foreign concept to me, but in the eyes of my family, it made me a dinosaur. "Mom, we've been through this 100 times," my son James would say, his tone dripping with frustration as he ran his hand through his thick, over-styled hair. "You can't just keep everything in a savings account. You have to invest in the future. It's how people get rich these days." "James, not everyone needs to get rich to live a happy life," I would respond, though I was met with eye rolls. To him, my thoughts were antiquated, and every word I spoke seemed to trigger some kind of silent mocking from his wife, Amanda. "Well, that's just the problem, Sarah," Amanda would cut in, folding her arms across her chest. "You're so obsessed with saving that you're missing the opportunities right in front of you. Stocks, crypto, bonds, they're the future. Everything you believe in is outdated." Her voice always had that sharp edge, that tone that made me feel like the odd one out, the black sheep of the family. And then there was Claire, my own mother. If she weren't related to me, I'd almost believe she was a complete stranger. She lived for the trends of the day, constantly in pursuit of some new luxury item that would elevate her status in the eyes of others. "Sarah, you have to live a little," she would say, as if spending frivolously were some sort of noble pursuit. "You've worked all your life. Why not use some of that money on things that make you happy? You're so obsessed with the future, you forget to live for today." But to me, the future wasn't something I could forget. It was a guarantee that came with a little discipline and sacrifice. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly guessed, was that I didn't need to keep everything in a savings account anymore. No, I had something far more valuable, a hidden fortune. A fortune I had kept secret for years, tucked away in a place no one ever suspected. The very money they all thought I was struggling to make was already sitting in a trust fund, left to me by my late father, who had always admired my traditional views. It was a quiet inheritance, the kind that wasn't designed to make me rich or to flaunt my success. It was meant to be a safety net, a buffer against whatever life threw at me. But to my family, I was just the woman who couldn't understand the modern world, the woman who was stubborn, resistant to change, and out of touch with the times. The constant pressure to embrace modern thinking had started to wear on me. I had endured years of them telling me what was best for me, what I should be doing with my money, with my time, with my life. They mocked me for not jumping on the latest financial bandwagon, for not spending my time chasing after the next get-rich-quick scheme. They didn't see the value in what I held dear, in the old-fashioned beliefs that had guided me my entire life. But that day, that fateful afternoon when James looked me in the eye and told me that I was holding them all back, something inside me snapped. Mom, you're so behind the times. It's embarrassing. I know you think your old-fashioned ways are noble, but they're not. They're holding me back, holding us all back. I can't believe you refuse to get with the program. Do you think this is how I'm going to make something of myself? This is why we're stuck, why I'm stuck. The words hit me like a slap across the face, but I didn't flinch. The sharp sting of his words only ignited something inside me, something I had kept buried under years of restraint. I stood there in the kitchen, my heart racing, my hands clenched at my sides. I had spent decades sacrificing my own desires, my own dreams, just to make sure James and Amanda had everything they needed. I had helped them buy their house, supported them financially, and even let them live off my savings to keep their lifestyle afloat. Yet, I was the one being treated like the problem. "You think I'm the one holding you back, James," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but steady and sure. "You don't understand the first thing about sacrifice, about what it means to give everything you have for someone else." He looked at me, confused for a moment, but his expression quickly turned to one of impatience. "What do you mean? What are you even talking about? You've never once asked me how I've made it this far. You never asked how hard I worked to give you the life you have now. All you see is a mother who doesn't get it. But maybe you're the one who doesn't get it." His eyes narrowed, and I could tell that this conversation was already over for him. He didn't want to listen, didn't want to understand. It was clear to me now that no matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I worked, I would always be just the person who was old-fashioned, who was outdated, and who was nothing more than a stepping stone in their path to greater things. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need to be their stepping stone anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to them. And most importantly, I didn't need to be old-fashioned for anyone else. I could make my own decisions, and I could take control of my future. I was done playing their game. I walked out of that kitchen with a purpose, my mind already set on what I would do next. The moment I walked out of that kitchen, I knew I had to make a choice that would change everything. I wasn't going to live my life shackled by their expectations any longer. But the hardest part was realizing that, up until now, I had been living with the answer all along, hidden in plain sight, like a secret I'd kept buried for far too long. I went to my study, where the bookshelves were filled with dusty novels, old photo albums, and the remnants of my past. It was in the back of the drawer under years of old receipts and bank statements, where I had carefully placed the letter my father had left for me. I pulled it out with shaking hands, the edges of the envelope worn from years of handling. It had been years since I read it. Too many years. I didn't need to at the time. I wasn't the type to dream of luxuries. I had always been content with what I had. But now, in the face of constant mockery and disrespect, I realized that maybe I deserved more. Maybe I deserved to live a life free from judgment, free from the people who saw me as nothing more than a cash machine. I opened the letter and read the words again. "Sarah, my dear, I know you will be uncomfortable with this. You have always been practical and modest, and I admire you for that. But know this, your worth is not tied to how much you have or how much you give. You have shown me more kindness and understanding than anyone else in my life. And while I know you would never ask for help, I want to ensure you have the freedom to live your life without worry. I have set aside a small fortune for you, for when the time comes that you need it. It is yours to use as you see fit, without any guilt or hesitation. You are worth it. Please take it when you need to and do something good for yourself. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You deserve more than you realize." My heart clenched as I read those words. My father had seen something in me I had failed to see in myself. He had always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. He had known that one day my sacrifices would leave me wanting more than just financial security. He knew that one day I would need freedom, and he had given it to me, quietly and discreetly. The letter wasn't just about money, it was about something deeper. It was about claiming my life, claiming my choices, and choosing to live without apology. I had spent too long living for others. It was time to live for me. I grabbed the phone off the desk and dialed the number I'd been avoiding for months. My financial advisor, the one person who knew about the trust. "Hello, Sarah." The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but I could hear the faint recognition in their voice. "How can I help you today?" "I want to sell the trust fund," I said, my voice steady, but my heart pounded in my chest. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure?" "This trust is not just about money. It was set up to provide for you later in life. It's meant to be a cushion, something to fall back on." "I'm sure," I replied. "I've spent my life falling back on others. Now, I need to do something for myself. I've been living in the shadows of my family's expectations long enough. I want to do something with this money. I want to buy something for me." Another pause. "All right, if that's what you want, we can proceed. I'll make the arrangements." The conversation was over in a matter of minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. I had taken the first step. The money was no longer something I was going to hoard for a rainy day. It was mine to use, to live, to breathe with. I put the phone down and stood there for a moment, staring at the papers on my desk, the family photos hanging on the walls, pictures of a life I had built for them, not for me. It was time for something new. And so, I took the first steps in reclaiming what was mine, not just financially, but emotionally. I went online, researched properties, luxury cars, anything that would symbolize my newfound freedom. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. I was simply taking what I deserved. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about standing up, finally, and living on my own terms. I wouldn't be the old-fashioned woman anymore. I would be someone who could be proud of her own choices. No more hiding. No more putting others before myself. For the first time, I was going to be selfish, and I wasn't ashamed of it. I drove to the bank, withdrew a sum large enough to make any real estate agent's eyes widen, and set the stage for the next part of my life. I was done living in their world of judgments and expectations. I was about to create my own. The next few days passed in a blur. I was riding a wave of adrenaline I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. The money from the trust fund was in my hands, ready to be used. It felt like holding the key to a life I had always wanted, but had never allowed myself to have. I wasn't just buying a house, a car, or anything else I had denied myself. I was buying freedom. I began researching. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. A sprawling estate on the outskirts of town, nestled between rolling hills and surrounded by nature. It was the kind of place I'd only ever seen in magazines, the kind of home I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to desire too deeply. It was too far out of reach, or so I thought. But now it was well within my grasp. I made the call. The agent, a woman named Lena, answered right away. Her voice was crisp and professional, but I could sense the eagerness in her tone. I wasn't the first high-end client she'd dealt with, but she probably didn't expect someone like me. "Yes, Ms. Walker," Lena asked. "How may I assist you today?" "I'm interested in the property on Maplewood Drive, the one listed for $2.8 million, I said, cutting straight to the point. I had done my homework. There was no time for small talk. Her breath caught on the other end of the line. "I see. A beautiful choice. Would you like to schedule a viewing? We can arrange a private showing for you anytime that's convenient." "Now," I replied. "I want to see it today." There was a slight hesitation, followed by a quick, "Of course, Ms. Walker. I'll have someone prepare everything. I'll meet you there in 2 hours. I hung up the phone and let out a deep breath. This was it. I was really doing it. I wasn't just buying a home. I was buying my place in this world, a space where no one could judge me, no one could laugh at me. For the first time in decades, I was choosing something for me and only me. I spent the next hour getting ready. I pulled on a simple dress that I had always considered too nice for day-to-day wear. But today was different. Today, I was going to present myself as someone who deserved to walk into the world of luxury without apology. I wasn't ashamed. I was proud. When I arrived at the property, my heart skipped a beat. It was everything I had dreamed of. Majestic, elegant, and everything my family had always mocked me for wanting. The sprawling grounds, the infinity pool, the high ceilings, everything screamed success. But it was a quiet success. It wasn't about showing off. It was about finally having something I could call mine, something I had earned on my own. Lena greeted me warmly, though there was a glint of curiosity in her eyes. She led me through the house, showing me the grand living spaces, the gourmet kitchen, the library with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Each room was more beautiful than the last. It was the kind of house that made you feel like you were living in a dream. But I wasn't dreaming. I was wide awake, standing in the life I had always imagined. "Would you like to put in an offer?" Lena asked, her voice professional but tinged with expectation. She was hoping I could tell that I wouldn't waste her time, that I wasn't just some curious bystander who couldn't afford the place. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, I'll take it." Lena's face lit up with a smile, but I could see her trying to hide her surprise. It wasn't often that someone made a decision so quickly, especially for a home of this magnitude. "We'll get the paperwork started right away, Ms. Walker. It's going to be an exciting journey." As we walked through the house again, I allowed myself to savor every moment. This wasn't just a purchase. This was me standing up for everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed. It wasn't about impressing anyone or showing my family that I could do it. It was about me. It was about proving to myself that I was worthy of my own success, my own happiness. I could almost hear their voices in my head, their laughter, their condescension. "You really think you can afford this?" they would say. "You're too old-fashioned for a place like this. You'll never fit in." Well, I was fitting in just fine. Thank you very much. By the time I left the property, I felt like a new woman. The weight of their judgment had lifted off my shoulders, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. I had done it. I had taken control of my life and my destiny. I called the bank and transferred the funds without hesitation. The contract was signed that evening, and I owned the property outright. No loans, no debt. It was all mine, and it was exactly what I wanted. The process was smoother than I'd expected, and as I left the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, as I drove back to the house I had shared with my family for so long, I knew that things were going to change. The people I had spent my life trying to please were about to see who I truly was, and this time, there would be no turning back. The morning after I signed the paperwork, I woke up in my own bed, but it didn't feel like the same bed I'd woken up in for years. There was something different now, something exciting in the air. It wasn't just the view of my new house from the windows, or the fact that I was now officially a homeowner of a property that no one, not even my family, could have ever imagined me buying. It was a new sense of freedom, of control, that I had never experienced before. I hadn't told anyone yet, not even James. I wanted to keep it to myself for just a little while longer, just long enough for me to savor the feeling of owning something that was entirely my own. But the truth was, I knew I couldn't keep it a secret forever. Later that day, I received a call from Henri Claire, my mother. Her voice was tight, too sharp to be casual, and I could already feel the storm brewing on the other end. "Sarah, "Where are you?" she demanded before I could even say hello. "I'm at your place, and no one's answering. What is going on?" I paused for a moment, realizing that my family wasn't just curious. They were expecting something from me. I had grown used to their subtle manipulations over the years, the quiet expectations that I would always fall in line, that I would always be the one to give. But now, I was no longer a part of their carefully controlled world. "I'm at my new house," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I bought it." There was silence for a moment. Then Claire let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "What? Bought it? You? You can't be serious. You know you can't afford something like that, don't you? Where did you get the money for this, Sarah? You didn't touch that trust fund, did you?" "I did," I replied, my voice calm. "I sold it. The money's mine to do with as I see fit." Another pause. This time I could hear the disbelief in her voice. "But you never told us you were going to sell the trust. That money was supposed to be for you in your retirement, not to blow on some ridiculous purchase." "I didn't blow it, Claire," I said, my voice hardening. "I bought a house. For myself. It's not ridiculous. It's something I've wanted for a long time." There was a long silence, and then she sighed, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sarah, this is insane. You can't just go around doing whatever you want with money that wasn't even meant for you to use like that. It's irresponsible." "I disagree," I said firmly. "It's my money, and I'm using it the way I see fit. If you don't understand that, then maybe it's time to stop asking about it." Claire's tone shifted, and I could almost feel her frustration over the phone. "This is about more than just a house, you know. You've always been so stoic, so unwilling to embrace what the world has to offer. What happened to you, Sarah? You're making a mistake. I thought you were better than this. You're throwing away your chance at security, your chance at making something of yourself." "I am making something of myself," I snapped back. "Something real, something for me, something I've earned." I hung up before she could say anything else. I didn't have the time or the energy to entertain her concerns. The next call came much sooner than I expected. James, naturally. "Mom, are you serious?" he demanded as soon as I picked up. "I heard what you did. What are you thinking? You sold the trust fund? That was meant to take care of you, and now you're throwing it all away on a house you don't need? What happened to saving for the future, huh? Why didn't you talk to us before you made such a big decision?" "I don't need your permission, James," I said, my tone cold. "I've been making decisions for everyone else my entire life. I don't need to consult you or anyone else about my choices anymore." There was a pause on the other end, and I could hear his frustration growing. "What are you gonna do, huh? Live in some ridiculous mansion all by yourself? You can't even afford the upkeep. You don't know what you're doing." "I do know what I'm doing," I said firmly, "and I don't need you to lecture me about what's best for me anymore. This house isn't just about the money, James. It's about my freedom. It's about finally doing something for me." "Freedom?" he scoffed. "This is just you being selfish. You've never once thought about the future of your family. You've always been so focused on yourself. And now look at you. You're cutting yourself off from us, just like you always do. Fine, don't come crawling back when you realize you've made a mistake." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. It was all about control, wasn't it? They wanted me to stay small, to keep making sacrifices for them, just so they could continue on with their comfortable lives. Well, not anymore. "I'm not crawling back, James. I'm moving forward. And if you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine." With that, I hung up. That evening, I sat in the living room of my new home, staring out at the vast landscape in front of me. The walls were still empty, but the space felt warm, welcoming. There were no expectations here. No one telling me what I should be doing, how I should be living. Just me. And yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The family I had given everything to, everything was suddenly so far away. I had given my time, my money, my heart, and now it felt like they were turning their backs on me for doing something that made me happy. But as I looked out at the beauty of the place I had chosen, I knew that it was all worth it. This house wasn't just a house. It was my life, my future, and it was mine to define. The phone rang again, but this time I ignored it. The family had their chance to treat me like I was important. Now it was my turn. The phone kept ringing, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to pick it up. It was either James or Claire, probably both, attempting to guilt trip me into returning to the fold, back into their world of expectations, where I was nothing more than a reliable source of support, someone to be used but never truly seen for who I was. But not anymore. For so long, I had lived to meet their needs. James's career ambitions, Claire's social aspirations, all the while putting my own dreams on hold. I had supported them emotionally and financially. I had made their lives easier while I sacrificed my own happiness. And for what? To be treated like an afterthought? To have my choices mocked as old-fashioned by people who never truly understood me? No, I was done. It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did, deeply. But love could no longer be the excuse for me to erase myself. My entire life, I had given them everything. I had spent years ensuring their success, their comfort, their well-being. And where had it gotten me? No gratitude, no respect, only more expectations, more demands. Now that I was in my new home, the weight of that realization hit harder than I expected. It was supposed to feel liberating, and it did, but there was also a gnawing emptiness. The family I had spent decades building my world around wasn't here. The walls were bare, the space overwhelming, and I realized just how isolated I was in this new chapter. But it didn't scare me. In fact, it fueled me. I had my freedom, my space, my chance to build something that was just for me. I could create the life I had always dreamed of, not in the shadow of their judgment, but in the light of my own choices. The next day, I received a text from Amanda, something I hadn't expected. I wasn't sure whether it was genuine concern or just another attempt to manipulate me, but I read it anyway. "Mom, you've gone too far this time. We're worried about you. You've always been there for us, and now you're cutting us off. Please, let's talk. This isn't you." The words stung, but not in the way I thought they would. They weren't a plea for understanding. They were an attempt to make me feel guilty for doing what I had every right to do. They wanted to pull me back in, to remind me of my duty to them. But I had done my duty. I had been the one who supported, who worked tirelessly, who made sure their needs were always met. And what did I get in return? Ridicule. I didn't respond to her text. I didn't owe them anything anymore. The following evening, I took a walk through the grounds of my new home. The air was crisp, and the setting sun cast a golden light across the landscape. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. As I stood by the edge of the infinity pool, looking out at the view, I could hear the faint sound of my phone ringing from inside. Another call, probably from James this time. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I turned my gaze to the horizon, the vast openness before me, a symbol of the limitless possibilities ahead. I had been the one who always held everything together, the one who took on their burdens without complaint. But no longer. The burden had always been theirs, not mine. I sat down on the ledge of the pool, letting the cool breeze brush my face. For the first time in so long, I felt like I was breathing. The weight that had been suffocating me for years, the pressure to constantly sacrifice to keep giving, was finally gone. This wasn't just a new house. It was my declaration of independence. The end of the old me, the one who lived for everyone else, who was always there, always available, always sacrificing. This new life, this new chapter, was for me. The selfishness of it, The unapologetic indulgence in what I wanted felt liberating. That night, after ignoring the steady stream of calls and texts from James, Claire, and Amanda, I realized just how much my family's expectations had influenced my life, how much they had shaped my decisions, my thoughts, my very identity. They had always seen me as an extension of their own lives, someone who would make things easier for them. But they had never really seen me, my needs, my dreams. And it wasn't just their fault. I had allowed it. I had enabled them. I had allowed them to define who I was. But now it was my turn to define myself. I wasn't just Sarah, the dependable mother, the loyal daughter. I was Sarah, the woman who had finally put herself first. As the days passed, I began to feel the full weight of my decision. The house felt less empty now. Every room, every corner was slowly starting to take shape. I bought a new set of furniture, decorated with things I loved, not what I thought would impress anyone. It felt good. It felt right. I realized that this wasn't just about the house. It was about rebuilding myself. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. If they didn't understand why I had made this decision, then that was their problem. I didn't need them to understand. I didn't need anyone to justify my choices anymore. Weeks passed, and I adjusted to my new life. The phone calls from my family grew less frequent, and my resolve grew stronger. The more I immersed myself in this new chapter, the more I realized that I had made the right choice. I had made a life that was entirely mine. No expectations, no pressures, just the pursuit of my happiness. And then, one day, I received a message from James, a simple one. "We need to talk." My heart raced as I read the text. For a brief moment, I thought about ignoring it, but something in me stirred. Perhaps this was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when they would finally understand, or at least, when I could make them see that this wasn't about rejecting them. It was about embracing myself. The day I received the message from James, I didn't know what to expect. Part of me was still holding out hope that maybe, just maybe, they had realized the weight of their actions, that they had come to understand that I wasn't the problem, that I had made this decision for myself, not to punish them, but to live my life on my terms. But another part of me knew better. I knew that they weren't coming to offer apologies. Not yet. They were coming to try, to make me feel guilty for finally doing something that made me happy. I could already hear James's voice in my head, angry, confused, demanding answers that I wasn't willing to give. I decided to face it head on. No more avoiding, no more pretending. This confrontation would be different. The knock on the door came just after noon. I had been expecting it. After all, they couldn't let things go. I opened it slowly, the familiar faces of James and Amanda standing there, looking somewhat out of place in front of my new home. "Mom, we need to talk," James said, his tone flat but heavy with underlying frustration. Behind him, Amanda stood with her arms crossed, her eyes narrowing slightly as she took in the surroundings, her lips curling into a tight smile that barely masked the judgment in her gaze. I stepped aside, motioning for them to come in. "I'm listening," I said, my voice calm, though I felt the heat of the moment rising within me. They entered, their eyes sweeping across the spacious living room. I could see the way they were taking in the details, the sleek furniture, the open layout, the quiet opulence of the place. I knew they were already mentally calculating how much it must have cost, trying to reconcile their image of me as the woman who was too old-fashioned for such things. James cleared his throat, a nervous energy in his voice now. "You know, Mom, we've been thinking a lot about everything. About you selling the trust fund. About this house." He paused, glancing at Amanda for support. She gave a slight nod but said nothing. "It just doesn't make sense. You've been so set on making sure you have security for the future. And now you've gone and blown it all on this place." I could feel my pulse quickening. Here it was, the moment where I had to make them see the truth. I looked at James steadily, my voice unwavering. James, for the last time, this is my choice. I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not going to live my life doing what you want me to do, making sacrifices for you while you ridicule me for trying to protect myself. Amanda's voice cut through the tension, sharp and mocking. Oh, please. You think we're ridiculing you? No, Mom. We're trying to help you. We're trying to make sure you don't end up like some old woman with nothing left when you're older. We're trying to give you a future, one you don't seem to understand. It stung, but I refused to let it show. You think I don't understand? You think I don't know what's best for me? I've worked my entire life to make sure you had what you wanted, what you needed, and this is how you repay me. My voice rose slightly, but I kept it controlled. All I ever wanted was the freedom to live on my terms. I don't need you to protect me, Amanda. I'm not some helpless old woman. James opened his mouth, but I held up a hand, stopping him before he could speak. No, James. Let me finish. I looked at both of them, the realization hitting me hard. They had never seen me. Not really. They had seen me as a resource, a mother, a financial support system, someone who could be relied on but never truly appreciated. I've given you both everything, I said quietly. I worked jobs you couldn't even imagine to make sure you had the life you wanted. I gave up my own needs, my own future, to make sure you had what you needed to succeed. I helped you buy your house. I paid for your education. I sacrificed everything to make sure you didn't have to. And you treat me like this. You laugh at me for trying to live for myself, for taking a step to actually enjoy life on my terms. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. You think I'm throwing it all away? I'm not. I'm finally living for me. For the first time, I'm not giving everything to you. James shifted uncomfortably, but Amanda was unfazed. Her eyes narrowed further. You're selfish, Sarah. You always have been. And now, you're choosing a house over your own family. You're choosing to cut us off, and we can't just sit here and let that happen. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. You want to know why I'm cutting you off? I asked, my voice low and firm. Because you've never seen me as anything but a tool to get what you want. You never saw the woman behind the mom or the provider. You saw only what you could take from me, and I've had enough. There was a long silence as my words sank in. I could see James fidgeting, his face red with frustration. But Amanda didn't back down. Instead, she stepped forward, her tone condescending. You're just bitter because you don't understand. You've made bad decisions, Sarah, and now you're trying to cover it up by buying your way out of it. I met her gaze head on, unflinching. No, Amanda, I'm not bitter. I'm finally doing what I should have done a long time ago. I'm living my life without the weight of your judgments. And if you can't understand that, then maybe it's time we stop pretending things are the way they were. At that moment, I realized that the old me, the one who had tried so hard to please everyone, was gone. And it wasn't just because I had bought a house. It was because I had finally stopped giving pieces of myself away. I had stopped letting my family's expectations shape who I was. I wasn't their servant anymore. I wasn't their punching bag, their safety net. I was Sarah, a woman who had learned that her happiness, her worth, was not determined by anyone but herself. James opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't wait for him. I had already said what needed to be said. Goodbye, James. Goodbye, Amanda, I said, my voice steady and cold. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the middle of the room. I didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me, and the weight of the confrontation still lingered in the air. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood at the threshold of the room, my hand still on the doorknob. For a moment, I felt a pang of doubt. It was natural, wasn't it, to second-guess yourself after such a massive shift in your life? But then I took a deep breath, letting the finality of the decision settle into my bones. I had finally done it. I had finally put myself first, but it didn't feel like a victory, at least not at first. The silence in the house seemed heavier now, more oppressive. I could feel the space pressing in on me, reminding me of all the years I had spent silencing my own desires to make room for everyone else. This house, my new home, was supposed to be a symbol of freedom, but instead it felt like a vast emptiness. I walked into the living room, staring at the wide windows that overlooked the sprawling lawn. The soft afternoon light filtered in, casting a warm glow on everything. The house was beautiful, everything I had wanted, but the loneliness was palpable. I sank down onto the plush sofa, letting the soft fabric sink under my weight. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel everything. The weight of the choices I had made, the sting of the words from my family, the quiet terror that I might have made a mistake. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Aunt Claire. It was long, far longer than I had expected, considering how abruptly I had ended the conversation with her earlier. "Sarah, I don't know what's going on with you, but you've really hurt us. You've always been the one to hold everything together, and now you're throwing it all away for a house? I don't understand what happened to you. You've made such a huge mistake, and you're isolating yourself. Your family loves you, but you're pushing us away. Please, let's talk. I'm worried about you." I read the message twice slowly. There it was again, the same pattern. She was worried about me, but not about my happiness, not about my well-being. She was worried about how my actions reflected on her, how my choices would impact the family's dynamic, their standing. There was no mention of support for the choices I had made, no real understanding of why I did what I did. It was all about control. I set my phone down, the message still open, the words hanging in the air. The message was a cry for attention, but not the kind I needed. It was a cry for her own reassurance, a reminder that I was still supposed to be the person who held everything together for them. But I wasn't. Not anymore. The next few days were filled with more messages and calls, each one more persistent than the last. I could feel the pressure mounting, their need to draw me back into their orbit to convince me that I was making a mistake. James tried calling me again. Amanda sent me another text, this time with more venom in her words. "You're being selfish, Mom. You've always said you wanted a peaceful life, but now you're just throwing it all away for this. How could you do this to your own family?" But each time I picked up the phone and saw their names, something inside me held firm. I wasn't going back to the old life. I wasn't going to crawl back to them like I had in the past. This wasn't just about a house. It was about me, finally understanding my own worth. The silence in the house was still there, but it started to change. I started filling the space with things that made me feel alive again. I began painting again, something I hadn't done in years. I filled the walls with art that spoke to me, things I had always dreamed of but never allowed myself to pursue because I thought it was impractical, too selfish. I found myself waking up early, enjoying long walks on the property, basking in the solitude that was finally mine. Slowly, the emptiness began to lift. I was not just occupying space, I was creating it. This house wasn't just my refuge from the world, it was my declaration to myself that I had the right to exist on my own terms. A week passed, and then one evening, I received an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who was standing on the other side. Claire. I didn't know how to feel, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding this moment. I opened the door, my pulse quickening, but I stood tall. "Mom," she said softly, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and something else, something I hadn't expected, a vulnerability. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. There was no hostility between us, no harsh words, no anger, just a long, silent understanding that this was the first real conversation we had had in a long time. We sat down in the living room, the same room where I had spent so many years trying to make things work for them, to make them see me. Now it felt different. It was my space, my world. "I don't understand, Sarah," she said finally, breaking the silence. "You've always been so dependable, so solid. But this is something I just can't grasp. Why now? Why this house?" I looked at her, my gaze steady. "Because it's time for me, Claire. I've spent my whole life living for others, making sure everyone else was taken care of. Now it's my turn." She didn't respond right away, but I could see the wheels turning in her mind. She didn't agree. Not fully, but she wasn't fighting me anymore. "I just want you to be happy," she said quietly. I nodded. "I am, Mom. For the first time in my life, I really am." For the first time, there was no judgment in her eyes. There was just understanding. We sat there for a while, in silence, and for the first time in years, it didn't feel like I was the one who needed to explain myself. She was beginning to understand, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough for now. It was a strange feeling, sitting there in my new home with Claire, having a conversation that felt like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocating under the weight of expectations. The truth was, I didn't need her to fully understand what I had done. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. What mattered now was that I had finally chosen myself. But as much as I had let go of their expectations, there were still moments when I felt the weight of the past, of everything I had sacrificed, and the person I had been. Claire and I talked for hours that evening, mostly about the past, my upbringing, the choices I had made, the sacrifices I'd made for her and James over the years. I wasn't sure whether she was truly seeing me for the first time, or if this was simply the beginning of an understanding that had been long overdue. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was here, listening, and not trying to convince me I was making a mistake. "I never realized how much you gave up," Claire said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "You never complained, never asked for anything in return. And here I was, thinking you had everything figured out, that you were just content with your life. I guess I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," I replied softly. "I made the choice to give. But now I'm choosing something different. I'm choosing to live for myself. It's not about being selfish. It's about finally having the chance to be who I was meant to be, not who you or James thought I should be." She nodded slowly, the weight of my words sinking in. For the first time, I saw the shift in her. Something had clicked. She wasn't fully there yet, but she was getting there. The following days were quiet, the house echoing with the newness of it all. But as I began to settle into this life I had fought for, I realized how little I knew about the woman I had once been. The woman before the sacrifices, before the years of being overshadowed by everyone else's needs. It was as if I had been living in the shadow of a version of myself I no longer recognized. I spent mornings painting again, lost in the rhythm of creating, the smell of coffee in the air, and the soothing quiet of the house around me. I'd forgotten how much I loved the simple act of creating, something I had put aside for far too long. The walls began to fill with my art, pieces of color and emotion that were now reflections of me, not the person I had been forced to be. It wasn't about making a statement. It was about rediscovering myself, what I wanted, what I needed, what made me feel alive, and it felt good. It felt like a freedom I hadn't known was possible. But then, one evening, I saw a message pop up on my phone. It was from James, again. "I don't get it, Mom. I really don't. You've always been the one who took care of everything, who made sure we were all okay. And now you're pushing us away like we never mattered. I don't know who you've become, but I don't like it. This is not you." The words stung, more than I thought they would. I thought I had made peace with the fact that James wouldn't understand, but the truth was, a part of me still wished he would. I didn't want to be a villain in his eyes. I didn't want him to think I didn't care. but I had to stop worrying about whether he liked the new me or not. This wasn't about pleasing anyone. It was about living, finally living. I set my phone down without replying. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. Over the next few weeks, things slowly started to change. Not just in my home, but in my mind. The isolation I had feared turned out to be an unexpected gift. I was learning how to be comfortable in my own company, how to listen to my own desires without guilt. And the more I allowed myself to be me, Samas, the more I realized that the world hadn't ended. My family still hadn't come to terms with my decision, but the quiet in my house was no longer oppressive. It was peaceful. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk around the grounds of my new home. The sun was low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the land. It was beautiful in a way that felt almost unreal. And it struck me in that moment. The home I had bought wasn't just about escape. It wasn't just about proving something to anyone. It was about finally creating the life I had always wanted, a life where I didn't need anyone's permission, where I didn't have to sacrifice my dreams for someone else's comfort. This was my moment. Later that evening, as I sat down for a quiet dinner alone, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't sad. I was simply content. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, and that was enough. And then, as if the universe was sending me a sign, I received a message from Amanda. It wasn't a long one, and it wasn't what I'd expected. I don't agree with what you've done, but I get it. I hope you find what you're looking for. Maybe it's time we both stopped pretending things will go back to how they were. I don't know what's next for us, but I wish you peace, Sarah. I really do. I stared at the message for a long time, reading it over and over again. There was no apology, no grand gesture, but there was an acknowledgement, an acceptance of my decision, and that, in its own way, was more than I had ever expected. I wasn't sure what the future held. I wasn't sure if James or Claire would ever fully understand. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed them to. The road ahead was mine to walk alone, or at least with the people who chose to walk with me on my terms. As the weeks turned into months, the house became more than just a structure to me. It became a sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe, a place where I could finally be who I was meant to be, without anyone's expectations weighing me down. The quiet became comforting, the silence no longer a reminder of what was missing, but of what I had gained. I spent my days exploring the land surrounding the estate, planting gardens, landscaping, finding peace in the simple things. I began to entertain a few close friends, those who had always seen me for who I was and never tried to make me feel small. We shared laughter, stories, and for the first time in ages, I truly enjoyed being around people who didn't expect anything from me. The truth was, I was still learning how to live this new life. I was still getting used to the freedom, the space to finally be me, without guilt or second guessing. But the more I embraced it, the more I realized I was changing in ways I hadn't even expected. I was becoming someone I could be proud of, someone who chose her own happiness over pleasing others. The phone calls from my family stopped, at least for a while. I didn't take it personally. I understood that this was part of the process. They had to come to terms with my decision in their own time, and I had to give them that space. One morning, while I was having coffee on the patio, I received a surprise visit. It was Claire. She stood in the doorway, her eyes a little softer than before. She didn't say anything at first, just took in the view of the house, the garden, the peaceful landscape. I could see the silent approval in her gaze. But there was something more, something deeper in her expression. It was the understanding I had always craved, but had never received. "Sarah?" she began, her voice tentative. "I've been thinking about everything you said, and, well, I think I've been wrong." I stood up, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "What do you mean?" She stepped inside, looking around the space before turning back to me. I've spent so many years thinking that you were the one who had to give and give, that you were the one who would always be there for us, that you would always sacrifice. I didn't see how much you were losing in the process. I didn't see you, what you needed, what you wanted. I didn't understand that you were losing yourself. She paused, eyes softening. I think I finally get it. You weren't just trying to get away from us, you were trying to find you again. I didn't know what to say. The words felt so heavy, but so much lighter than I had imagined. For years, I had wanted this, an acknowledgement that I had a right to my own desires, my own life, without always being someone else's anchor. You don't have to understand everything, I said, my voice steady. But I do want you to know that this is the happiest I've been in a long time. I'm not trying to hurt anyone, I'm just living for myself. Claire nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. I can see that, and I'm glad you're happy. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. That afternoon, we spent hours talking, the conversation flowing easier than it ever had before. There was no tension, no resentment, just the beginning of a new understanding. I had finally become the woman I was meant to be, the woman I had been all along, and for the first time, I felt like Claire truly saw me. As the days passed, I began to reconnect with small parts of myself that had been forgotten. My passion for painting, my love for reading, my desire to be out in the world without worrying about the judgments of others. I started visiting nearby towns, exploring the world outside the walls of my house, no longer hiding, no longer apologizing for the choices I had made. I also reached out to old friends, those I had lost touch with over the years. I shared my journey with them, the struggles, the victories, the quiet moments that had changed me. And they supported me in ways I hadn't expected. They weren't shocked. They weren't angry. They were just happy to see me finally alive. Months later, I received another message, this time from James Wars. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the phone screen. The past had always been filled with so much pressure, so much expectation. I didn't know if I was ready to face him yet, but I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed to know if he could see me too, not just as his mother, but as someone who had found herself after years of being lost. The message was short, but it carried the weight of everything unsaid. I don't agree with what you did, but I'm starting to understand. I hope you're truly happy, Mom. Maybe we can start over. I'm willing to try. It was a start, a tentative one, but it was enough. It was enough to let me know that perhaps, in time, my family would come to accept me, not just for the mother, the provider, the woman who had always been there for them, but as Sarah, a woman who had reclaimed her life. As I sat there reading the message, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had come so far, further than I had ever thought possible. And while the road ahead was uncertain, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally walking it as my true self. The rest of the world could catch up when they were ready, but for now, I was happy. And that was all that mattered.